Most of what you're worried about hasn't happened and won't, but it still controls you. It still slows you down. It still keeps you stuck. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. That's the truth you keep avoiding. You're not reacting to reality. You're reacting to possibilities, to scenarios that exist only in your mind. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? So you hesitate. You delay. You overthink. Not because something is actually blocking you, but because you've imagined that something might. And your mind treats that as real. That's the trap. You create a problem, then respond to it, as if it exists. And that response becomes your reality. You don't act. You don't move. You don't execute. Because in your mind, there's already a risk, already a consequence, already a reason to hesitate. But nothing has actually happened. You're reacting to something that isn't there. And that's why you feel stuck. Not because you are. Because you believe you are. Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. Epictetus. You've been giving your thoughts authority, treating them like facts, like instructions, like warnings you need to obey. But they're not. They're possibilities. Unverified, unproven, unreal. And yet, you've been structuring your actions around them, limiting yourself based on things that haven't happened, adjusting your behavior based on outcomes that don't exist. That's how you create invisible barriers, barriers that feel real, because you respond to them. You avoid certain actions. You delay decisions. You stay in your comfort zone, not because reality demands it, because your thoughts suggest it, and you follow, without questioning, without testing, without challenging it. That's where the problem is. Not in your situation, in your interpretation of it. You've been living inside a version of reality that exists only in your mind. And that version is full of limitations, full of imagined consequences. So of course you feel restricted. You built the restriction. How your mind creates fake problems. Your mind doesn't wait for reality. It predicts it. Constantly. Automatically. Uncontrolled. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. You don't see what is. You see what might be. And that's where everything starts to distort. A simple situation appears. Neutral. Undefined. And your mind fills in the gaps. What if this goes wrong? What if they judge me? What if I fail? You don't stop there. You build on it. Layer by layer. Scenario by scenario. Until something small becomes something heavy. Something complex. Something that feels real. But it isn't. It's constructed. By you. Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. Epictetus. That's the process. Event, interpretation, emotion, reaction. And the interpretation is where the problem begins. Because your mind doesn't default to neutral. It defaults to protection. It looks for risk, for threat, for potential failure. And then it amplifies it. Not because it's accurate. Because it's trying to keep you safe. But safety, in this case, becomes limitation. Because every imagined risk creates hesitation. Every imagined outcome creates resistance. Every imagined failure creates doubt. And that doubt affects your behavior. You slow down. You second guess. You delay. Not because reality requires it. Because your mind suggested it. And you followed. That's how fake problems become real limitations. You act as if they exist. So they start shaping your actions, your decisions, your results, without ever being tested, without ever being confirmed. Do not anticipate trouble, or worry about what may never happen. Benjamin Franklin. You've been anticipating everything, preparing for outcomes that haven't happened, adjusting your behavior to avoid situations that don't exist. And in doing that, you restrict yourself. You limit your actions. You reduce your opportunities, all based on imagination, not reality. That's the cost. You don't fail. You don't lose. You don't even try, because in your mind, you've already calculated the risk, already imagined the outcome, already decided it's not worth it. So you stay where it's safe, where it's predictable, where nothing challenges your assumptions. But nothing grows there, because growth requires exposure. It requires action. It requires stepping into uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly what your mind is trying to eliminate. So it creates certainty through imagination, even if that certainty is negative, even if it limits you, even if it holds you back. Because to your mind, certainty feels safer than possibility, even when possibility is better. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. You don't fix this by thinking more. You fix it by acting. Because action exposes truth. It tests your assumptions. It proves what is real and what isn't. And most of the time, what you feared never happens. Or if it does, it's smaller than you imagined. Manageable, controllable, temporary. But you never reach that point. Because you stop before action. You stay in thought. And thought, unchecked, expands. It builds. It exaggerates. It distorts. Until something simple feels overwhelming. That's how your mind creates fake problems. Not intentionally, automatically. But just because it's automatic doesn't mean it's accurate. And that's what you need to understand. Your thoughts are not facts. They are suggestions. And you've been accepting them without question. That's what changes next. Break the illusion completely. You don't need to control every thought. You need to stop believing every thought. That's the difference. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Right now, you treat thoughts like instructions, like signals you have to follow. If a thought feels strong, you assume it's important. If it feels uncomfortable, you assume it's warning you. So you react. You adjust. You obey. Without questioning. That's the illusion. Thoughts feel real. So you treat them as real. But feeling real doesn't make them true. Your mind produces thousands of thoughts every day. Random, repetitive, unfiltered, and most of them are not useful, not accurate, not relevant. But you don't filter them. You don't evaluate them. You accept them. Automatically. That's where the problem is. Not in thinking. In believing. Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them. Epictetus. A thought appears. This might go wrong. And instead of questioning it, you accept it. Then you feel it. Then you react to it. Now it controls you. Not because it was true, because you believed it. That's how the illusion works. Thought, belief, behavior. Break the belief, and the chain collapses. But breaking belief requires something you haven't been doing. Distance. You create space between you and what your mind produces. You observe it, without attaching to it, without reacting to it, without immediately accepting it as truth. You treat it like data, not instruction. It appears. You notice it. And then you decide. Is this useful? Is this real? Does this require action? Most of the time, the answer is no. And that's the moment everything changes. Because now, you're not controlled by thought. You're evaluating it. That shift gives you control. Not over what you think, but over what you do with it. And that's what matters. Do not be carried away by the imagination. Check yourself, and you will find that it is nothing. Marcus Aurelius. You don't stop the thought. You stop the reaction. That's how you break the illusion. Because the illusion survives through reaction, through engagement, through belief. Remove those, and it has no power. The thought still appears, but it doesn't move you. It doesn't slow you down. It doesn't control your behavior. It becomes background, irrelevant. And once that happens, you're free, not from thinking, from being controlled by it. That's the goal. Not silence. Authority. You become the one who decides what matters, what gets attention, what turns into action. Not your thoughts. You. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. You don't prove this by understanding it. You prove it by acting differently. A thought says, wait. You move. A thought says, this might fail. You act anyway. A thought says, this is uncomfortable. You stay. That's how you break the illusion. Not once. Repeatedly. Until your actions are no longer influenced by unverified thoughts. Until your behavior is driven by decision, not reaction. That's when control becomes real. Not theoretical. Practical. Consistent. Unbreakable. Take back control permanently. Control is not something you feel. It's something you practice. Daily. Consistently. Without exception. He who is not a good servant to himself will not be a good master. Seneca. Right now, your thoughts lead. You follow. They suggest. You react. They create scenarios. You adjust. That's the pattern. Automatic. Unquestioned. And as long as that pattern exists, you're not in control. You're responding. So we reverse it. You lead. Your thoughts follow. You decide what matters. You decide what gets attention. You decide what turns into action. Everything else is ignored. That's control. Not eliminating thought. Filtering it. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Epictetus. You set a standard. Clear. Defined. Non negotiable. And once that standard is set, it overrides everything else. Thoughts don't change it. Feelings don't adjust it. Circumstances don't weaken it. It holds. And you follow it. Every time. That's what makes it permanent. Because it's not based on how you feel. It's based on what you've decided. That's the difference. Right now, your actions depend on your state. If you feel motivated, you act. If you don't, you delay. If it feels easy, you move. If it feels uncomfortable, you hesitate. That's instability. And instability creates inconsistency. So you remove dependence on state. Completely. You act regardless. Regardless of thought. Regardless of feeling. Regardless of comfort. That's control. Do not be carried away by impressions. Say to every harsh appearance, you are an appearance, and not at all the thing you appear to be. Epictetus. Every thought becomes a test, not a command. It appears. You recognize it. And then you decide, does this align with my direction? If yes, you act. If no, you ignore it. Simple. Clean. Effective. That's the system. Not complicated. Not theoretical. Practical. Because control doesn't require complexity. It requires consistency. You apply this in real time. A thought says, wait. You check it. Does waiting align with your direction? No. So you move. A thought says, This might go wrong. You check it. Does that change your standard? No. So you act. That's how control is built. Decision by decision. Moment by moment. Until it becomes automatic. Until you don't even need to think about it. You act based on standard, not suggestion. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. You don't prove control by talking about it. You prove it by how you move, how you respond, how you execute. Consistency is proof. And once that consistency is in place, everything stabilizes. Your actions become predictable. Your results become reliable. Your progress becomes steady. Because there's no interruption. No hesitation. No drift. That's what permanent control looks like. Not intensity. Stability. You operate at a level that doesn't change daily. It holds. Always. And that's what makes you dangerous. Focused. Clear. Unshakable. Because now, nothing internal can stop you. Not doubt. Not fear. Not overthinking. All of it exists. But none of it controls you. That's the final advantage. Nothing controls you anymore. This is where it ends. Not the work. The conflict. The constant back and forth in your mind. The hesitation. The overthinking. The invisible resistance that's been slowing you down. It stops here. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Because control was never about stopping your thoughts. It was about deciding who leads. And now, it's clear. You do. Not your fear. Not your doubt. Not your imagined problems. You. That's the shift. You no longer react to what appears in your mind. You evaluate it. You filter it. And then you act based on what you've decided matters. Not what feels urgent. Not what feels uncomfortable. Not what feels risky. What aligns with your standard. That's what moves you. Everything else becomes background. Noise. Irrelevant. He who is brave is free. Seneca. Freedom is not the absence of thoughts. It's the absence of their control. Your mind can suggest anything. Fear. Doubt. Worst-case scenarios. It doesn't matter. Because suggestion is not authority. And you've stopped treating it like it is. That's what makes this permanent. You've removed the link between thought and action. There is no automatic response anymore. There is only decision. That gap changes everything. Because in that gap, you choose. And what you choose defines your life. Not what you think. Not what you feel. What you do. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. You don't prove this by understanding it. You prove it by how you operate. Daily. Consistently. Without exception. You act when it's uncomfortable. You move when there's doubt. You execute when your mind suggests delay. That's control. Real control. Not theoretical. Not temporary. Permanent. Because it's not based on state. It's based on identity. You are someone who acts. You are someone who follows through. You are someone who does not hesitate. That's who you are now. And identity doesn't negotiate. It holds. Always. That's why there's no going back. Because going back would require you to act against who you've become. And that's not something you do anymore. The patterns are gone. Not because they disappeared. Because you stopped feeding them. No reaction. No hesitation. No delay. They have nothing to attach to. So they fade. And what remains is clarity, focus, execution, uninterrupted. That's what it means when nothing controls you anymore. You are stable. You are consistent. You are directed. And most importantly, you are in control. If you made it this far, then you already know. So don't stop here. Subscribe to the Unbroken Protocol. And go to the next video. 10 things winners do daily. Because now that nothing is controlling you, it's time to build the daily structure that keeps you operating at the highest level. See you in the next video.